Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Three Rivers Council meeting. First on the agenda is a presentation to Council from Michelle Burge, and we'll let Michelle from MRSB take the floor. Evening, Michelle.
Danielle's just going to sit there.
Thank you, Danielle.
Do you want me to turn that on? Do you want me to turn? Oh, it is on. Okay, perfect. All right. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Michelle Burge, and I'm one of the partners at MRSB. So it's my pleasure to be here again this evening to review the audited statements for the town of Three Rivers for the past year. First of all, thank you on behalf of the firm for the opportunity to be auditors again this year. We do appreciate it, and we always look forward to working with everyone. And thanks to Dawn and Danielle for their excellent cooperation during the audit. Everything went very smoothly again. So before you have what we call the consolidated financial statements for the town of Three Rivers. Of course, consolidated meaning it does include or consolidate all of the entities within the town, including the town, the fire departments, the utilities, new this year, the Cavendish Wellness Center. So all of those things are combined together. A couple of pages will actually be combining or consolidating all of those entities together, but then we'll go over a bit more information later on and how each one kind of did on an individual basis. I'll open up the floor probably at the end unless, if there's something you want to stop me, that's no problem at all. So the first item I'm going to refer you to is on page number 2. The page numbers are at the bottom of each of the pages, and this one's called the Independent Auditor's Report. So this is where we provide our opinion on the audit that we performed again this year. So it's issued to the mayor and the members of council of the town of Three Rivers. So under the opinion, it says that we've audited the consolidated financial statements of the town of Three Rivers, which comprise the consolidated statement of financial position at March 31st, 2025, and the consolidated statements of operations, changes in net financial assets and cash flows for the year that ended, and notes and schedules to the consolidated financial statements, including a summary of significant accounting policies. So in our opinion, the accompanying consolidated financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the town at March 31st, 2025, and the results of its operations and its cash flows for the year that ended in accordance with the Canadian accounting standards for the public sector. So this would be the same opinion that we have provided to the town in previous years. So this is what we call the standard auditor's report, and we give a clean bill of health on the audit again this year. The remainder of the report would be the same as well as in previous years. So then we'll start with the numbers on page number 4. And this is one of the pages that is consolidated. So this would include all of the entities, again, under the control of the town. So it would be all of those combined. So this statement gives you a snapshot of the financial position of the town at March 31st, 2025, which is the fiscal year end for the town, as well compared to the previous year for March of 2024. So the first information is the financial assets, and they're about $9.2 million for 2025, and that's up from $7.3 million in the previous year. So it's up approximately $1.8 million. And that is mostly in terms of what you have in your bank accounts are obviously higher than the previous year. You can see they're up from 3.6 million to 4.2. And the other significant item is the accounts receivable. So obviously there was a lot of work still ongoing at the end of March in terms of the extension, the Brunel extension. So there was quite a bit of money outstanding, mostly from infrastructure, from ISIP. That was about $1.3 million at the end of the year, just with the timing of some bills outstanding for the contractor. And of course, then HST would also be pretty significant at that point in time, just again because of some large capital projects. That was almost about $600,000. So those two items in particular are the reason that the accounts receivable are higher than last year. The next information is then the liabilities, the debts and obligations that you have. So you can see the first line, the accounts payable is up from 478,000 up to 2.7 million. Again, this would be timing relating to the bill outstanding for the contractor for the Brudenell extension. That was almost about $1.6 million at the end of March of 2025, so that's the significant increase there. The deferred revenue, the next item in liabilities, at 3.9 million. The majority of that is your gas tax, or now previously called gas tax, now your CCBF, Canada Community Building Fund. So you have about $2.4 million at the end of March that you can carry forward into this new 5-year agreement with the CCBF. As well, outstanding at the end of the year, there are also some money carrying forward for the Housing Accelerator Fund that you hadn't used all of those funds before the end of March. That will carry over to next year, which is about another $1 million. So that's the majority of the deferred revenue. Last year, your gas tax was a little over $3 million, but you did, again, spend some during the year on active transportation and on some of the water and sewer upgrades. And then finally, we have the last liability is your long-term debt. So that's up from 1.7 million to 2,244,000. So that's an increase mostly relating to the new fire truck for Cardigan. There was new debt taken out for that, as well as a new debt for a new maintenance tractor as well. A couple other loans were kind of moved from one institution to the other, but that was just kind of paying out existing ones. But there really is just 2 new ones during the year. So the long-term debt has increased because of that. So overall, your liabilities at the end of March of 2025 are 8.9 million, up from 6.9 million last year, an increase of about $2 million. So most of that is relating to that outstanding bill at the end of the year for the contractor for the Brudenell extension in the accounts payable. That's a significant increase there. So you have financial assets of about 9.2 million, and those essentially mean that those are assets that are in a bank account in cash or will be cash soon after the end of the year. So what we call liquid. So they're about 9.2 million. You have liabilities of 8.9 million. So it leaves you with a line that's called net financial assets of 292,000. And that essentially means that you have enough liquid assets to pay off all the debts that you have. It's down a little bit from the previous year, but partly due to timing of just, obviously the extension was ongoing at that point and not everything was finalized in terms of all the government grants or what portion you might put into term debt. But there's not a lot of municipalities across PEI. That's a number that's a positive. So obviously that's one good indication of the town is in a good financial position at the end of the year. Then we have non-financial assets at the end of the year. The most significant part of it is the line called tangible capital assets. And they're up from 30 million last year to about 37 million this year. So that means a number of capital projects that were ongoing during the year. In total, almost about 8.8 million was spent during the year. About 5 million, a little over 5 million was for the extension for the water and sewer. But then the town also spent about 2.4 million in terms of about $1 million almost on sidewalks and trails, some new vehicles, and some upgrades to other equipment. So about 2.4 million for the town as well. So that essentially is kind of all the various assets within the town and all the related entities. That's all the major infrastructure. So up again with those major capital projects during the year. So you have net financial assets of 292,000 and non-financial assets of 37.6, and the two of those together represents the overall accumulated surplus for the town. Now at 37.9 million, of course. The majority of that is invested back into the infrastructure of the town, but it has increased about $7 million from the previous year. So a number of things there obviously are very positive indications of the financial position of the town at the end of the year. On the next page, on page 5, is the Consolidated Statement of Operations. Again, this is one of the statements that does combine everything together. I'm just going to go over this one pretty quickly because we'll go over each one kind of individually. But this one does show you on a consolidated basis, again, of all the entities under control of the town, the revenues for the year. The budget was $5.8 million. The actual revenues were $7.7 million, so they are higher than budget. And the previous year, the revenues, again, for all areas at $6.4 million in the previous year. So revenues have increased about 1.3 million from the previous year. A lot of that, of course, in the town. And then, of course, adding the Cavendish Wellness Center, that would be an additional revenue source. Then we have the expenditures, again, for all the areas. The budget was 5.4 million. The actual expenditures were 8.4 million. The previous year, the expenditures in 2024 was 6.89 million. So expenditures were up about 1.5 million. And again, partly in terms of the Cavendish Wellness Center being added, but additional under general government, you can see those expenditures are up approximately $1 million. So the overall result, initially when you prepared your budget, it was anticipating there'd be a surplus of about $364,000. And that does not include amortization, and that's why I wanted to kind of indicate that when we show that you're showing a deficit, when we prepare the financial statements, we are required to include amortization. You don't have to include amortization, and that's, under the MGA, that's not a requirement. So if we kind of convert so that the numbers are the same, you have an operating surplus of $364,000 anticipated from the original budget. If we exclude the amortization, your surplus for the year would be about 1.1 million. So you're in fact greater than what your budget is. So again, another positive indication of the health of the town. And the previous year, again, we are including amortization. It would have been, again, very close to that, about 1.2 million overall in terms of the surplus. Now, of course, out of that, you do have to pay your debt, your loan payments, which are only about $400,000. So you're still, well above, the requirement of what you'll need for cash flow and obviously making your payments. So again, the town has had a really good year in respect of the financial results. The other revenues then, the government transfers for capital would be about $7.8 million this year. A lot of that would be from infrastructure for the Brudenell extension. That was almost about 3.7 million. You used about 1.6 million of gas tax funds. And then you also had funds from active transportation from the province and the municipal capital expenditure grant, which you get 10% on any capital funding. You can see the previous year, those government transfers for capital were about 1.7 million. So each year they do fluctuate just depending on how much or how major the projects that you might be. So really it's that operating surplus that is the most kind of key area for the town. And as I said, overall, the surplus now at the end of the year at 37.9 million, that surplus created essentially by those grants for the year. I'm going to get you to skip over a few pages here. We'll go to page number 21. So on page 21 is the schedule of the tangible capital assets. So this again is the major infrastructure within the town, including land, buildings, street and sidewalks, machinery and equipment, of course the water and sewer systems. At the beginning of the year, all of those various assets cost the town or predecessor municipalities about 52 million. During the year, as I mentioned, there's an addition of about 9.6 million. As you can see, the majority of that is in the sewer and water system in terms of the Brudenell extension. Then there's also streets and sidewalks, which is almost about $1 million. Most of that is Georgetown sidewalks that were completed during the year. And then about 1.5 million in machinery and equipment. The biggest item there would have been the new fire truck for Cardigan. Then there also would have been a couple of new maintenance vehicles, the generator at the Playhouse. So there's a number of things that were completed. But in total, as you can see, about 9.6 million that was capital projects during the year. And as we just saw on the previous page, you all had, almost 8 million of that covered by government funding. So that obviously is a pretty good ratio in terms of the net cost to the town of those major projects. So now at the end of the year, all of that infrastructure cost about 60.7 million. And at the end of the year, there's a net book value of about 37 million. So every year we are amortizing or depreciating those assets because over time, they will have to be replaced. Maybe not, immediately, but over a period of time. So the next item I'm going to refer you to is on page number 25. So over the next number of pages, we'll go over kind of the details of each one of the entities under the control of the town. As we went over in the previous page, that was on a consolidated basis, but just to see how each one did on kind of an individual basis. So the first one is general government, or essentially the town. So the revenues for the town, the budget was at 4.1 million. The actual revenues were 4.96 million, almost about 5 million, so that's an increase of about 800,000 over budget. In the previous year, the revenues were about 4.3 million, so that's an increase almost about 610,000. So a couple areas that have increased, so the property taxes went up from 2.1 million to 2.4. So that's about $314,000 increase. So there wasn't any change in the tax rate, so that really is just more development in the town, and then just the assessed values that increase every year, you get the benefit of that as well. The government transfers for operations, so these are various funds that you do receive from the government. They are down a little bit from the previous year, and most of that is the equalization grant, and that's kind of the not end, but almost the end of that original agreement from amalgamation with the province. So that is down from the previous year. Then we have the fire dues, so they're up from 653,000 up to 752,000. So that's an increase of about 100,000. Cardigan did increase their rates, and then they're also, the rest are kind of based on assessed value, so they would go up as well. And then the development permits, also a significant increase there from 98,000 up to 358,000. So there was two significant ones during the past year that did increase the development permits up about 250,000. So those are the three main items that have kind of increased, a slight decrease in a couple of other areas, but overall the revenues did increase about 609,000 from last year, and about, as I said, 800,000 over the original budget, so all positive things there as well. So then the next information is kind of the major categories of expenditures for the town and general government. So protective services, the budget was 946,000. The actual expenditures were very close to that, 948,000. And the previous year, it was 835,000. So the main increase there is the fire protection services. So what's obviously paid to the fire departments. And again, that's based on kind of an assessed value, so that increases every year as well. Then we have the next category of maintenance and infrastructure services. So the budget was $919,865. The actual is $911,114. Again, very, very close to budget there. And the previous year, it was $782,000. So that's an increase of about $130,000. But again, the majority of that had been, budgeted for. The biggest increase there is probably in terms of maintenance wages, so there was an additional staff member added, so that did increase the expenditures from $476,000 to $545,000. And then we have vehicles, equipment, and tools. They did increase from last year, but again, very close to budget, and that's mostly in terms of repairs, up about $20,000 from last year. The next category then is community services. So the budget was $604,236. Again, very close at $605,000. John, you must have been right on in these, were you? Last year it was $576,000, so it's up approximately $30,000. So a couple areas that did change from the previous year. As you can see close to the top there, the Cavendish Farms Wellness Center, that was an increase from $55,000 to $136,000. So that was covering some capital upgrades, the property tax, and a grant in lieu of taxes. So those were additional amounts that were provided for by the town. The grants and sponsorships, midway down in that category, down from $62,000 to about $39,000. And those are just general amounts to like TCAP, Inclusions Each, Transportation East, so those are down a little bit from the previous year. Then we have the public receptions and festivals up from $24,000 up to $82,000. So this was the costs relating to kind of all of the festivals, mostly in terms of the Cardigan Canada Day, Montague Summer Days, Georgetown Summer Days, in Winterval. So those were kind of additional events that were held kind of in this particular year. So there was costs relating to that. Yeah. Yeah, so that's like 35,000 almost, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then we have recreational programming right below that, down from 89,000 down to 29,000. A lot of it last year related to kind of Fiona cleanup for damages relating to some of the properties. So a number of those things in terms of fencing, bleachers, a number of things that had to be repaired. Insurance did cover, again, the majority of those types of things. So again, overall, very close in terms of actual to budget, up a little bit from last year, just again, a couple of areas. At the top of the next page then would be the final couple categories for general government or the town. So financial and corporate services, the budget was $54,675. We have 1.5 million, but the two items here, of course, are amortization of intangible assets and amortization of tangible capital assets. So again, we are required under our standards to include those amounts. So that's the significant reason for the increase there. The only other area that really did increase from last year, as you can see, is the interest on long-term debt, again with some additional debt added during the year. So that's up from 27,000 to 43. And then the last category for general government or the town is the administrative services. So the budget for 2025 was $1,597,737. It went up to about 1.8 million, and the previous year it was 1.3 million. So that's an increase of about 523,000. There's only really a couple areas that have changed here. As you can see, the municipal offices midway down from 159,000 down to about 62,000. The previous year was some extra costs relating to roof repairs for some of the offices and for some damage relating to the ceiling. So that was almost about 60,000 last year. The area that is up is the line you can see as professional fees. And this relates to a firm that did help with the HST recovery. So the town was able to recover a significant amount relating to that. But of course, there was a cost to that, and that was about 460,000. So that's that extra amount included there. There also was some amounts, of course, included in revenue and against kind of the capital assets as well. I think in total it was about 1.3 million, maybe that was recovered, I believe. And then finally the wages up from 709,000 to 927,000. So that's an increase of about 220,000. Of course, would be some increases, but of course, CAO kind of transition there for only a portion of last year and then full in this year. So as I said, overall, the expenditures for the town, the budget was $4,123,000. The actual expenditures were $5.8 million, and the previous year they were $4.9 million. So they're up approximately $900,000. Again, in the kind of administration areas is a key change there, as we saw on the previous page. Mostly everything else within, a few $1,000s. And of course, as I mentioned, the amortization is something that we've included in our financial statements. So when the budget was initially prepared, it was showing that it would essentially be a break even for the town, a small loss of 3,200. Again, we're showing a deficit of 890,000, but if we exclude the amortization, you would have a positive number of almost about 600,000. So well ahead of kind of what your budget was initially, and last year would have been about 800,000. So you're still on a consistent performance there. The next page then would be the Montague Water and Sewer Utility. So the revenues for budget were $930,000, and that's pretty much exactly what it was at $930,000. The previous year at $932,000. So there hasn't been any rate changes there, so that's fairly consistent. In terms of the expenditures, so the budget for expenditures were $731,000. The actual expenditures were $999,000, and the previous year they were $886,000. So they're up approximately $113,000. Again, you can see the difference between budget and actual is a line that we have for amortization, which is almost about $300,000. If we exclude that, you're actually under kind of your budget for the year. So a couple of the areas that did increase, again, it would be the amortization of tangible capital assets, again with some significant costs relating to the Brudenell extension. So that went up from $247,000 to $296,000. Repairs and maintenance, close to the bottom there, also increased from about 156,000 up to 207,000. One of the significant costs was kind of some pumping fees during the year, was almost about 45,000. And the rest is kind of routine, regular maintenance. And then wages just went up slightly, but that would just be kind of annual increases. So it's really between the amortization and then, of course, the repairs that are the two significant increases there. So again, when the budget was prepared, it was assuming there'd be a surplus of about 198,000. Again, because we're including amortization, we show a deficit, but if we do exclude the amortization, it would have been an overall surplus of about 227,000. So again, just slightly higher than what your budget was. And last year would have been a surplus of about 293,000. But again, there's some extra costs there this year. So the utility also in a good financial position. The next page then, on page 28, is King's Playhouse. So the revenues, the budget was 347,000. The actual revenues were 533,000, so a significant increase over budget, and a significant increase over last year when they're 409,000. So they're up about 124,000. And really the main change, as you can see, in two areas is admissions. Admissions up from 67,000 to 194,000. So a lot of new shows, events, obviously increased the admissions. And then fundraising, donations, and sponsorships. There was an additional amount from a foundation during the year. That was about $44,000. So there was additional funding there as well. So that did increase the revenues from last year and kind of over the budget as well. In terms of the expenditures for the Playhouse, the budget was $346,750. The actual expenditures were $452,000, so they're about $100,000 more. But compared to last year, they're pretty much right in line. So the main increases would really relate to the admissions, so additional costs. So we can see that the canteen and catering purchases went up from 30,000 to 35,000. The dues and fees, that is Show Pass, which is kind of a portal where you can, buy online. There's again a cost associated with that. So that 16,000 does include that amount during the year. So that's an increase from the previous year. And then the program costs went up from 108,000 to 161,000. So that's a lot with entertainers and their costs additional during the year. But wages went down from the previous year from 237,000 to 166,000. There was a number of extra kind of subsidies, grant subsidies in the previous year, and obviously additional people that were hired. Some were, different programs in the previous year. So the wages are down from the previous year. But overall, it ends up that initially it was anticipated there'd be kind of a break even, and there's $81,000 profit, which is excellent for the Playhouse. Significant improvement from a deficit in the previous year. So then the next one on page 29 is the Cavendish Wellness Center. So this would be the first year that obviously the town has operated the Cavendish Wellness Center. So the revenues, obviously there's nothing to compare to for last year, but the revenues were about 473,000. So 273,000 of rentals, 147,000 of government transfers for operations. Most of that would be EDA wage subsidies. 33,000 subsidies and grants. That would be mostly from the town in terms of kind of funding, but also an arena grant as well. And then other revenues, about 18,000. These were kind of related to monies that came in after you guys took over. Some were probably should have been collected under previous ownership, but that's the other revenues is just relating to that. So that's 473,000. And then the expenditures for the year were about 444,000. One of the items, the miscellaneous, the 50,000, that all relates to bills from the previous ownership in terms of, some outstanding bills, some amounts that had to be repaid. So that was about 50,000. Then we have repairs and maintenance, which are about 70,000. So that's cleaning, snow contracts, repairs. And then, of course, the other significant one would be wages, about 201,000. But again, the majority of that is covered by subsidies. So it ended up that there is a surplus of about $29,000 for the wellness center for the year. So that's a positive result as well. And that includes paying, some bills outstanding from previous.
Definitely a positive, yes.
Yeah.
That was a bit of a rocky road there for a while. Yeah, thank you for that.
The next page then, on page 30, is the Waterfront Development Corporation. So the revenues for the year were about $301,000. The previous year they were $294,000. So they have increased about $6,000 from the previous year. The government transfers for operations, which is mostly, again, wage subsidies, are up from the previous year. Fees are actually down a little bit. The number of berths that were rented, and this goes back to the previous summer, not this summer, they were down actually from 123,000 to 107,000. And product sales, which would be fuel and gas, went up a little bit. Then the expenditures went up from 279,000 in 2024 to 302,000. So they have increased about 23,000. The biggest increases there would be the purchases, which would be for fuel, and that's kind of in line with obviously the sales being up. Repairs and maintenance went up from 38,000 to 45,000. Nothing of significant, just some additional items there. And then wages going up just slightly. So a few other areas went up, but again, nothing significant. So it ends up that there is essentially break even for the waterfront, where last year did show a profit of about 15,000. So expenses were a little bit higher this year is the reason there. Then the next page, on page 31, is the Cardigan Volunteer Fire Department. So revenues budgeted at 225,000, and the actual is 223,000, so very close. And the previous year was 153,000. So they had increased their rates from the previous year, so that's the reason for the increase. The expenditures, the budget was 87,600. The actual was 165,994, and the previous year it was 112,000. So they're up about 50,000 from the previous year. Again, from budget to actual is the amortization that we've included, which is about 38,000. And then the other kind of significant items that would have increased as well. You can see the interest on the long-term debt. So again, with a new loan for their new truck, the interest did increase there from about 4,600 up to about 10,000. Repairs and maintenance also did increase from about 23,000 to 54,000. So that was painting one of the trucks. The new truck, obviously, some costs associated with that, some travel to get it, and some items to get it ready for use. So there was some additional items there relating to that. Yep.
Just one question. I noticed that you have amortization of tangible capital assets on some of the accounts, and for example, you have it on the Cardigan Fire Department.
Yeah.
But there isn't anything on the
Like the waterfront. Yeah.
Is that because it's all included in the town statement?
Town, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So the ones, especially for Cardigan,
Yeah.
they actually have purchased some of their own equipment over the
Okay.
years, and they did again this year as well. So that's the amortization of those items that they have purchased directly on their own.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, that's
Most
fine.
other things, it would be under the town. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. So the Cardigan Volunteer Fire Department did show an overall surplus for the year of about 57,000, up from 41,000 last year. The next page, on page 32, is the Georgetown Sewer Utility. So the budget for revenues was 124,500. The actual revenues was 129,534, which is very close. And the previous year at 125,400. The only real difference there is a little bit of extra interest, up from 2,600 up to 6,200. And then we have the expenditures. So the budget was 91,642. The actual expenditures were 112,479. And the previous year, they were 91,000, so they're up about 18,000. So again, between budget and actual, we have included amortization, which is about 28,000. And really the only significant change here is under the repairs and maintenance. So that's up from 23,000 up to 42,000. Again, there wasn't anything significant. There was a few repairs extra that had to be completed. and some new supplies and materials purchased, but there wasn't anything very significant there. So the overall for the sewer utility for Georgetown does show a surplus of about 17,000. The previous year that was 34,000. Again, the repairs just a little bit extra this year. Page 33 is the Georgetown Volunteer Fire Department. So the revenues were budgeted at 101,000, the actual at 105,246, and the previous year at 101,000. So all very consistent there. The expenditures, so the budget was 102,178. The actual expenditures were much less than that, only about 54,000. And the previous year, the expenditures were about 73,000. So they are down from the previous year, and as I said, quite a bit under the budget as well. So really, in terms of expenses going down about 20,000, the only couple areas, the honorariums were down just slightly and under budget. And then in terms of supplies and equipment, the budget was about 29,000, but only about 5,400 was the expense for the year, and down from 18,000 in the previous year, where they did purchase some extra hoses and cylinders, which was probably about 12,000. And most of the other areas very consistent. So ends up that the Georgetown Fire Department does show a surplus of about 51,000, and that's up from 27,000 in the year before. And last one, museum. So the revenues for 2025 were about 62,000, and the revenues for the previous year at 56,000, so up about 6,000. So the government transfers for operations, that's all wage subsidies that come from the province, down a little bit from 42,000 to 39,000. And then the museum, the actual kind of sales or revenues at 22,000. But this does include emergency funding from the town, which was about 14,000. So if you kind of exclude that, their revenues are similar to last year. And then the expenditures for the museum were 58,000 for 2025, and they were 67,000 last year, so down about 10,000. And it's really in terms of the wages, so they're down from 50,000 to 39. So less in terms of funding that was available, and so less in terms of staff as well. So overall, it does show that this museum has a surplus of about 3,500, but that again does include a grant kind of from the town, where last year it did show a deficit of about 10,000. So all great and positive things, I think, for the town. Great financial year. Any questions, anyone?
That's great news. That's always good to hear that. Any questions from council for your auditor? I don't know how you keep everything straight. You can remember things that, yeah. Yeah.
So we don't see the sportsplex because it's managed by the board, is that?
Yeah. The board pays their own, handles their own bank account, so we don't have that.
Yes, and yeah, we
Yeah.
do that one
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
So the sportsplex wouldn't be included in amortization either, would it, on this?
It would
Not
be.
on ours, right? And it would be
Yes,
on
it
theirs?
would be on there.
Yeah, okay, yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so anybody that we do it for, yeah. No, okay, thank you very much, Michelle.
Oh,
We're
my
always
pleasure.
great to hear your news. As long as it keeps being good news, you're welcome back.
Good.
Okay. And I want to thank the staff for all the assistance they give Michelle too. And yeah, everything looks great. So thank you again this year.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, we have a few minutes before our regular meeting starts. It was advertised at 6, so we'll stick with